where inspired ideas and absolute realities converge. A safe place where boundaries blur and secure data shape the world. Learn, connect, and grow. Join us on this journey into the Measurverse.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Did you enjoy your lunch? Okay, cool. You sound. We have the lucky timing to actually do this panel after lunch, so hopefully, will be energetic enough for you guys to get entertained. But anyway, welcome to this very important topic, which is actually the future of mobile measurement. A lot of us here are in various stages of implementing measurement in our companies. I know, for example, I'm from Home Credit, and we only made the switch to more digital platforms over the last few years. So this is something evolving for us. But definitely, there's something we need. We need to know about the changes that happen every day and how they're impacting measurement, our business, and of course, the insights that we gain from them. So joining me today, I have a few gentlemen, a few good men on stage, and I will ask them to introduce themselves, describe their place in the Measurverse, and we'll go from there. Francesco, you can start.
Hi, everybody. My name is Francesco Renzo. I lead the go-to-market team at Moloco. A little bit about Moloco. It's an operational machine learning company founded about 8 years ago. Late last year, we crossed $1 billion revenue rate, and we're well on our way to 1.5. Our first application is a mobile app promo DSP, and we are building our new applications in retail media and online video streaming ad platforms. It's fantastic to be here. I must confess that I probably spend an unhealthy amount of time thinking about mobile measurement. It's getting bad, you know. I talk about this at dinner with my wife. Couldn't be more excited to be here with you all.
You also talk with me about measurement.
That is correct. Often, yeah.
Yevgeny, been in the industry for over 10 years. Joined last year to lead the AppsFlyer's product strategy. I'm 41 years old, and I learned earlier that the reason I still play Legos is because I feel 16. So that's a big lesson learned so far. I think in terms of the topic at hand and in general, what AppsFlyer's role is in this Measurverse, at least as we see it, is being the growth partner of everyone in this room and in our ecosystem by not only building the technologies to enable businesses to grow, but also a lot of that is how our technology collaborates with other players in the market, whether it's the internal teams, other technology platforms. And I think also on top of that, a big role that we see ourselves playing is also events like this, where I think we get people together to kind of break the silos of each organization and learn more from each other, so we can essentially grow together. Very happy to be here. Thank you.
Cool.
Hi, I'm Chris from VNG. My current role is Director of Gaming Investments. So VNG is a Vietnam-based company. In Vietnam, we do a lot of social platforms, music, streaming. Outside of Vietnam, we're primarily a game company. I don't have a strong marketing background, but I'm a strong consumer. And I'd like today, my main goal would be to really listen to what Francesco and Kenny have to say and really share how I'm looking at things from more of a sort of investment and business budgeting background.
Okay, that's a good point of view. I think all of us here have different points of view, so it would be interesting to hear what everyone has to say. Maybe the first question that we can tackle is, what are the changes that we've seen over the last few years in terms of mobile measurement? And have you guys encountered any challenges in this space? Anyone can start.
I'll break the ice. So, of course, everybody's familiar with the privacy changes that Apple has introduced a couple of years ago. Google is following suit with the plans for an Android privacy sandbox. And that has appended the ecosystem a little bit. What was very deterministic and precise measurement has been fragmented a bit in a few different measurement frameworks. So what Apple will do to attribute a certain install to a network and determine what the impact was of a certain ad dollar is quite different from what other networks may drive in terms of the measurement approach. And that fragmentation is important to dig into. The rules around attribution windows and how exactly a dollar is driving a certain user are different if you're looking at the Apple measurement framework versus what other networks will adopt to drive their performance. It is also interesting to see how the ecosystem has adapted to all of these, right? And different media sources will adopt slightly different approaches to claim credit for a certain ad interaction. What we see when we talk to our most sophisticated advertisers worldwide, maybe the elephants in that metaphor from earlier, is that they invest a lot of time trying to determine for each dollar that they spend, the channel, the inventory where it's served, what was the rule by which that particular dollar was measured in terms of return. And the rules can be very different. Again, in terms of attribution window, how do you consider different type of ad interactions. So, to me, the first important bit that we are seeing is an increased investment in making sense of the different measurement frameworks that are in the industry. The second thing that we have noticed is how much our top partners hold us and their other media channels accountable for that kind of performance. Our most sophisticated advertisers will really grill us to say, hey, how are you actually doing it? What are you claiming credit for? How is that working? And that's something that, I'm sure that many of you, very successful mobile-first entrepreneurs and professionals are also familiar with. And, of course, it matters for media allocation. But, it was interesting to hear Kimi earlier, by the way, fantastic panel this morning. Kimi was mentioning how experimentation is such a core component of innovation. And there's no real trade-off there. They're just steps in the same process. And for experimentation, you need to understand how the outcomes are being measured, especially when it comes to media spending. I think Tammy was mentioning accountability to investors and make sure that you are deploying your dollars in the best possible way. For any sort of paid media investment, if that's a big component of your growth strategy, you may want to make sure that that is working out well and you have a clear idea of how that's working. I would say the good news is that the folks at AppsFlyer have been at the forefront of these for quite some time. I love the single source of truth launch from earlier in May. The cutting, bleeding edge of how to make sense of it all is what the folks in this room are all about. So that's the good news, I would say. What do you think, Evgeny?
So there are good news.
There are good news. There are plenty of good news. I think it's not like one is right and one is wrong, right? It's just a matter of understanding out of these different measurement approaches, what are you actually measuring and what is the difference there and how should that factor into your media allocation?
Yeah, I think there's many different things that evolved in the last years in the context of measurement. Measurement has always been important. I think, on the macro level, it's much more important now, more than ever before, to justify your resource allocation, justify, whether it's for investor return purposes or just in general, how every organization is trying to do much more with less resources these days. And at the same time, the privacy evolution brings a lot of, I think, great news for, the customers of our customers. That will be experiencing the internet with a different lens, and it's less about the measurement frameworks, but privacy leading the way. And I think that was an interesting catalyst to introduce even some old measurement approaches, such as media mix modeling, among others. But if it's in Apple's case, it's SK, Ed Network, Google Privacy Sandbox, attribution APIs coming up soon. And I think as the market evolves, I think the difference would be how, are those elephants, are you able to become one of those elephants and really grow from this opportunity by understanding that things are different, and it's much more than one measurement framework out there. There's going to be more introduced, more approaches. Some are siloed by certain media sources, but I think there's a need to lead towards a new standard, and obviously AppsFlyer is the one position to lead that way. And I think part of that standard is to be able to marry different measurement frameworks into a single decision-making framework. And I think that's kind of what it boils down to.
So I was just going to add, like, I know it was hard for marketers to adapt to these changes, but you're right, it's beneficial for the customers, and it actually made us have to work harder because the attribution windows were shorter. The content needed to be more relevant to the customers so that they wouldn't, opt out. So definitely good changes for the customers, and we hope to be a smarter organization when we use this. Chris, maybe you have a perspective also from that angle.
Yeah, I think for us, one of the hardest challenges, especially for talking about the gaming industry, is that, for example, VNG itself is a very UA-heavy gaming company, right? We do hardcore games, and we basically measure, how much money each user contributes versus how much it costs, right? And if it costs less to contribute, then we do it, right? So I think that's really, and then I think for very casual games, it's even more so, right? So I think there's actually a big change in the industry because we haven't been very successful since the changes have taken place at lowering UA cost, right? Speaking frankly, we've been able to optimize a little bit better than at the very beginning, but it's actually not been fast enough to really improve the margins at all. And and there's huge development costs are actually going up, right? And marketing costs are going up as well. So what happened is that instead of looking at the marketing side, we've also taken a look at what kind of games are we doing. There's been a big trend recently in games, for example, to have games that have a lot of content, are story-based, right? Because in the past, you think about online games, it's just click, 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 and then you don't read the story. It's not like the old games where you're reading the story, you have a world. But now there's a big demand among younger users, among people, where they're getting their story and they're learning from games now. So when you have that content in the games, we actually found that it was a lot easier to brand and build a community on that game, right, on that product. So our UA cost naturally went down. And when you have games that actually focus on story, focus on characters, focus on the world, and then you're putting them on social media, whether TikTok has been really effective for us, Meta and Google are still very strong. But once you have like a story about the game, rather than this is you just shoot a bunch of guys and you beat up a bunch of guys, you get some rewards. You're actually changing it. Look, you're actually in and you're in this world, and this happens in this world. So that actually has been more effective for us in the kind of content we're putting out. To bring the cost down.
That's interesting. So you have to kind of push yourself to be more relevant, like I was saying, so that the costs go down.
Also translates into different value to your users in that process, and not only drives CPIs down, but also pushes LTVs upwards as well. So more value to the users, and I think it's a good example of adapting to this new reality, like not only as within the marketing orbit, but on the company level itself. I think it's a good example.
Yeah, pretty good example. We've been talking a lot about mobile measurement, but of course, people are not just consuming media on mobile. They're doing a bunch of different screens. How do we actually see the integration of traditional media measurement with mobile measurement, across the customer journey? And a while ago, Evgeny, you mentioned about media mix modeling and how that is looking for people who are more used to that than mobile measurement. Maybe you could comment on this interplay between the two worlds.
Yeah, I think there's three aspects here. One, in general, I think as consumers, we're engaging with the brand's product across different platforms. So I can use a certain, I can play a game on a console, on PC, on mobile. I can, buy from a mobile app or on the website or at a physical store. So that has evolved, obviously. And I think there was this, until a couple years ago, the things that were measured were only the things that can be measured. So basically, the approach was, performance marketing should be measured, and all the rest is, this kind of peanut butter approach. And I think what the market is going through now with this transformation, it forces everyone, especially with trying to do more with less resources, we have to measure everything. And I think that the conversation is on a different level, the technology is on a different level, but also the understanding that not everything can be measured in the same way, but you still need to make decisions. You still need to understand how do you allocate your resources properly. And I think it goes back to the previous conversation on how do you facilitate that within your organization, how do you create this one single perspective within your organization that everyone agree on. It might not be perfect, but it's more important for everyone to agree on it and then act on it. And definitely new ways of measurement. I think there were a couple examples in the opening presentation. But I'm excited about this because I think also the way consumers engage with the brands are in much more measurable ways technologically. Even on the brand side, the evolution of CTV. So the coverage is going there pretty quickly.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting. First, I was so happy that Sheila, you phrased the question around traditional media versus digital media as opposed to brand versus performance, because sometimes those are equated. And I bet at least half of the folks in this room perhaps disagree with the dichotomy of brand versus performance. Ultimately, it's all about performance. You want to drive outcomes. It's all about the measurability of those outcomes and whether those are going to be direct or diluted over time. And yeah, to Yevgeny's point, for each of those channels, there's going to be a spectrum of measurability. For your opted-in users on a digital campaign, deterministically what those users did. And then there's going to be users that do not opt in, and then you're going to have more of a probabilistic attribution approach. And then you get to less trackable media, like, I don't know, out of home, where you might be able to know from a top-down perspective how much business are you getting from folks who were in that region, right? And you're going to have much less trackable things like your traditional linear TV, if you're doing that. And I think the core is to make sure that you are clear on what are your business goals, and then figure out how to translate those into your campaign goals. That translation of business goals to campaign goals is core. And then you have to get into an experimentation mode, appreciating that the level of certainty in your measure is going to be on a continuum. It's going to be on a spectrum. And also that these different media will interplay with each other. And in addition to whatever is directly attributable to a channel, you're going to have a halo effect on other channels. I wish there was a silver bullet here, but my observation working with advertisers across industries is that the approach really depends on the industry you're in, and the business model you have, and what are your users, and what's their behaviors, and how do they like to engage with your content? How do they see your product? And that exercise of going deep on the different media channels you have, how measurable each of them is, and then the experimentation framework to see the interplay between them and the incrementality of each of them is going to become increasingly relevant. The more the available channels shift away from purely deterministic, highly measurable, to less measurable.
I think there's, I would argue that there's no such thing as an organic conversion. There's always a reason for that person to stumble upon that product. And obviously, traditionally, marketing teams are positioned to cover, in most cases, the paid efforts, marketing efforts, but there's so many users engaging with your product, with your brand on a daily basis, And there's a reason for that. That reason needs to be measured properly, that this, so you can understand, and I think a good example, which is very far off than the traditional performance marketing, would be what, the Volvo example with not only the word, but, and that was not driving them, but I think as an outcome of many of their, it could be their product efforts, that, on the ongoing basis build that brand. And that should be attributable to those efforts, even if those are not pure marketing efforts. And I think in today's world, where things are really multi-platform, there's so many more ways to bring users in from your other properties, from other channels, not to mention bringing people back to engage with your brand as well. And that all obviously needs to be measured.
And then there's the virality point, right, that Chris was making earlier. How much the users that you acquire in an attributable manner will end up posting your content or talking to their friends, and that K factor starts making your media budgets more efficient.
Exactly. And just a small point for me is when we're looking at each user we bring in, we're not just looking at them coming into the game, but can they stick into our community, right? Can can we measure more users by users? Okay, maybe they might not even play this game or use this product, but if they're able to be part of the community and contribute, and we can factor them in, they might be there to the next product or bring them in, right? So rather than just having an immediate reward, I think that's one of the things we have to learn.
I think that's a great point, that it's not only paid media that gets that contributes to a conversion, but it's also everything else: product, the customer experience, the brand perspective, and the different types or the spectrum of measurability. Because of course, when I'm from the old school going to the new school, and when I was doing that transition, I mean, it went drastically the other way. Like, if it's not measurable, let's not do it, which is not really the right approach. We have to find a good balance and be able to kind of measure across the funnel.
Yeah, be comfortable with different levels of certainty, right? And experiment. We have a new connected TV offering that AppsFlyer started supporting recently, enabling us to bring this product to market. It's interesting how more than half of our customers adopting that product are seeing not only the performance that's directly attributable to those campaigns, but also the regular user acquisition campaigns benefiting from it for the areas where they're running both. So that interplay is so important. To your point, not only across paid efforts, but also community, social, product efforts.
And that helps justify allocating more budgets towards a certain activity. So the indirect impact of, that's another way to drop CPIs, basically, right? So those users that are within that community, they bring so much more value by bringing more people and building the brand overall, and that means that actually the impact of those campaigns were higher than what I thought.
Okay. Chris, actually, we spoke about it some time ago, that you guys are using mobile measurement as a publisher as well as kind of a media. Yeah. So maybe you can explain a little bit about the difference in perspective from those two.
A publisher versus like a developer,
Yeah.
for example, right? Yeah. So I think one of the big challenges VNG has had. Before, we were similar to, say, like C/Garena. We were just a publisher. We would take games and publish them in Southeast Asia. But like Netflix, eventually they can cut you off, right? So you have to develop your own content. So I think now entering into the whole development, I don't know what you want to call it, but it's a big world. It's a new world. Just because you're in games doesn't mean you know every single part of it. So I think when you're doing measurement now, it's also interesting for us, because in the past we just measure, how do we bring this user in the game? How much are they going to pay? How much is it going to cost, right? But now you're doing stuff at like, is this new function? Is this art style? Is this new action going to be popular with players? So you're actually, we call it A/B testing. We're actually measuring not just on the final result, but just on like some small parts, And I see that nowadays a lot more of pub developers are instituting things like putting a survey, right, into the game, right? And then now we see the best marketers are making maybe 500 different assets to market just one new feature, right? And then they will test all 500 of those on a small scale, right? And then they'll pick the best one out of there and run that big time, right? In the past, it was almost unfathomable before. I said I wasn't going to say AI. Before AI, it was very hard to make 300 to 500 assets just for one thing, right? But and if you make 20, that's great. But now you can make 500, like 100 different videos, 100 different banners, and see which one has the highest click rate. And for that, I think it's been one of the more good things about AI that has helped us really lower down UA costs.
Since you mentioned that word AI, maybe you can all share how you think AI is going to shape this future of mobile measurement. Besides the easier way to make 500 assets.
Yeah, I would say that there's definitely that creative design element around experimentation becomes much faster. And it will become likely less of a competitive advantage, right? Because it gets a little bit democratized, and the ability to churn and test so many different assets will accelerate and become more accessible to everybody. Beyond that, I would say that what we are seeing around machine learning, two applications that I would call out beyond the media buying itself, the targeting, the supply optimization, all of that. One is what Chris was mentioning earlier around really evaluating what the ideal user path would be from an onboarding perspective in a way that delights them, improves their experience, and ultimately leads to good business outcomes as well. And you can do very simple correlations, or you can do fancier stuff, right? And experiment in a multivariate manner. What is the right type of onboarding path, the right type of UX, the right type of journey for this particular user based on everything I know about him or her? And then the second piece is what Yevgeny was mentioning earlier. When it comes to media mix modeling and other top-down measurement methodologies, you can do it the traditional way, which for the math nerds out here would be differential equations, to essentially try to correlate outcomes to media spend. Or there are a bunch of companies popping up that apply machine learning models to find those correlation, find those relationships between a media investment and business outcomes. So, there's the Gen AI piece on creatives, there is the UX improvement, and then there is a more sophisticated top-down measurement that can be powered by that.
Yeah.
I'm very excited actually about the impact on the consumer side, the consumer perspective. I mean, I think one of the questions earlier was who's using ChatGPT, and almost everyone in the room raised their hand. And I think very quickly, well, I'll say actually this. So marketing budgets, they are spent towards where the users are. Just like some of our today's biggest platforms did not exist 5, 7, 10, 12 years ago. And today they take over most of the marketing budget. I think AI will create completely different consumer behaviors. I mean, from the consumer perspective, I think definitely it's already exciting to see how companies already integrate AI, and AppsFlyer was very quick to act on that and release support already to measure those journeys. So if you're engaging with AI to try and ask for something, and you thanks to that you engage with a product, that obviously needs to be measured. And I think in the same context, once the users are onboarded, I think thanks to AI, end users will become somewhat prompt engineers within the product. So if it's the onboarding within a game, whatever those 5, 10 onboarding actions are effectively, well, I like this and I'm planning to do that. So what do you think I should do next? And that, with the advancement of AI so far, will completely change how personalized the experiences are. And that's something that, again, I think the faster people will move towards that, and the technology is pretty much here. I think it's going to be very exciting, and that cannot be possible effectively without very deep and very proper measurement of all your user engagement so far. That means measuring much more within your product, so the AI can be much smarter to essentially move the needle.
Yeah, I mean, essentially AI, it takes time, right? I mean, AI has been around for a long time. For ChatGPT, which is just a great product that brought a lot of attention to AI. And I think some smart people like AppsFlyer have been using AI for a long time, right? And collecting, it's going to take that even longer of time before we really see AI really starting to really affect businesses at a bigger scale, right? So I do think that it is a good wake-up call for us to start learning AI because AI is not going to take our job, right? Someone who knows AI, knows how to use AI will take our job.
But I think one of the, I guess, the dark side of having all these bots and AI and whatever available is also the fraud that's happening in the industry, right? And it's quite hard to control and also impacting measurement. I mean, is that something you see? I guess, how does it impact your end of the business? And yeah, let us know what you guys are doing about it.
Yeah, happy to take it from the media buying side. I would say it was a very, very big problem in 2017, 2018, 2019. Plenty of white knights in the industry, some of which include AppsFlyer, have done a great job at cleaning things up. I would say that there are certain markets where these practices are still quite prevalent. I would say from our side, we work very hard to make sure that we implement real-time filters. Again, we have a machine learning model to try and detect likely fraudulent behaviors, and then we partner with AppsFlyer to get them to become better and better over time. To me, the tricky piece sometimes for this is how the symptoms of fraud now are becoming intermingled with the other types of behaviors that media has, right? When you saw 4 years ago very abnormal click-through rates, you would say, that smells fraudulent. Now, it may not be fraudulent. Maybe it's just, that there is a certain set of creative approaches that drive that click-through rate up more or less artificially, but it's a real user. It's not fraud. So it's more complex, right? The same symptom now can point to two different diseases, not just fraud. It can be different type of attribution tactics. And that's where you have to hold your media partners accountable, and then you have to partner with your measurement supplier to make sure that they can help you navigate all of that and distinguish, right, from the symptoms what's the disease.
I think it's like Frenzo said, the problem. I mean, not necessarily in the context of AI. You brought this. You brought the AI topic earlier, so I don't know when you want us to stop talking about it. But it's definitely there's gaps in knowledge in different industries, different regions, and the practices applied in some cases are still the same ones as in 2017, 2018. And yes, thanks to AI, it has been much. While much more complex to address, it's something that is always a constant moving target. That's not going to go away. There's a lot of money involved. Fraud is not going to go away, and we understand that, and we acknowledge that, and we're investing a lot of our resources, and we see that as something that not only impacts where do the budgets go. A big part of that is how does that contaminate the data in the context of taking actions with AI later, but also how it impacts your other marketing channels, how it impacts attribution in general, and there's a lot of different. I think you kind of framed it correctly. There's a big difference between, if a user is really seeing an ad, not seeing an ad. Did that user really engage with the ad? How deep did they engage with the ad? What is the meaning of a click engagement? What is the meaning of a view engagement? And how does that truly translate, correlate to the user's intent? And I think it's a big part of the broader topic of measurement. Definitely something that we specifically to AI with deploying against that. It's much. It requires less resources to find a smoking gun, but it's still a moving target, and it requires a lot of adaptation and technology to solve that, especially in real time.
So still a lot of things to develop for this future, right? maybe another question also, as we are close to wrapping up, is what is the top priority for you to prepare for the future of mobile marketing? Chris.
Okay, that's a big question. I think that from our perspective, on the marketing side, I think we've come to an attitude that for the UA team, obviously I think for them, they have to really start working on how to work and build up our system of data, right? Although we can't collect like users' personal data, there's still a lot of data we can use, and how to build that data globally in different markets and really understand it. I think if your company hasn't been doing that well, which I think for many companies haven't, you have to start that as soon as possible. I think secondly for us, when looking at marketing, we have to really be careful and think about what kind of content we're going to be bringing to the market in the next few years. There's only so much you can optimize if you don't have the right product for the market. And I think a lot of our UA is actually now going into testing the kind of themes, the kind of we call gameplay, styles, the genres, even the feelings of the world or the art style, right? And the sort of different IPs and characters that people like to see and what the trends are. And I think the better you understand those, the better your marketing is going to be in the long term.
Interesting. How about from Moloco?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things. So we are very much an engineering first company, and a very large portion of our engineering team is focused on building what we call our insurance. We have constantly evolving models that use different amounts of signals. There are a lot of open questions out there around what the future will look like, what kind of choices will the platforms like Apple and Google make in the future, what the details will look like. Those outcomes are uncertain, but what is less uncertain is the possible scenarios, right? So, you can think about what are the 4 or 5 possible outcomes 2-3 years out in the future. And we spend a lot of time thinking about what is going to be our data infrastructure, our modeling infrastructure, our offering to our advertisers for each of those scenarios. And we try to stay very much ahead of that and measure what kind of performance degradation we would incur, what kind of measurement changes we would need to make. It's something that we invest constantly on. And the second piece goes back to what I was mentioning at the beginning. We spend a lot of time with our advertisers helping them navigate this environment. We believe very deeply in transparency and controls. And so to the extent that we can, we try to provide really granular reporting to our advertisers and granular information on how we serve on different types of traffic with different amounts of measurability, and try to educate them. I was just talking last Friday, with this very large casual gaming company out of Europe. And we were talking about how they can go about adjusting the scan measures in order to take into consideration the fact that they have a very different attribution logic relative to probabilistic attribution. That kind of advisory, that kind of consulting is something we're investing heavily in. And I like few things more than a little measurement workshop. So, if you want to dig more, find me later. Happy to chat about your specific situation.
I'll order one.
Sounds good. You pay drinks though. You buy drinks.
You got it. So I think we're very we're in a very unique position within the market. We're very humble to be the market leader in this transformational period of time, and we appreciate this position, and we see ourselves as someone that should lead the way in setting new standards, in building the technologies that I think first and foremost deliver and bring the trust within our customers, and see how much we're investing in the right things. But I think a big part of that is also in how we enable collaboration over data within the industry. in a privacy-centric manner. And I think that's a big part of this transformation that is happening right now. It's not necessarily about having, this measurement framework or the other, or how do you combine them, but moreover, how do you collaborate on top of that? How do you derive insights? How do you activate your users properly? And while preserving their privacy. I think I think it's a very positive and very interesting change and very interesting time for us to be at. And basically our focus is on leading towards the right way and building the right bridge, and this is where our resources are.
I think just to add like one point as well too is that I think as a business, right, when you think about the UA, like I think some of the smartest people in the world now are actually working on UA, right? They're working with Wall Street. We're a tech company trying to figure out the most effective way to sell ads, right? So, I'm not so concerned as much about, say, the execution of UA, because I feel like you have partners like AppsFlyer and Moloco who will be able to, teach you at a reasonable, price to be able to do that well. But I think it's really about really understanding the product and what users want. Like, for example, in gaming, there was a big controversy for a while because they started banning all the fake ads, right? They would show some fake casual game ad, and you'd go in, but it wasn't that game. So now what they started doing is, okay, let's see which casual game ads are the most popular. The marketing team works with the game design team. We'll add that small game into the game. That'll be an event in the game. So now it's and then when they click on the ad, they'll go directly in the game, and they'll play that casual game, and then eventually it'll go into the big hardcore strategy game that it is, right? So those are ways. I don't know. Is it a trick? I'm not sure. But it's really better to understand like how you can really draw users in and have them use something they are familiar with to then go into something a little bit deeper. Right, like a strategy game, for example, which is more hardcore. Yeah.
Okay, I think I learned a lot from you guys. I will try to summarize. Hopefully, I'm able to consolidate. But of course, the first thing that we discussed was the challenges in the industry right now, especially on the privacy side. But we shouldn't be taking it as, obviously we have to roll with the punches, but we can take it as an opportunity to kind of refine the service we're giving in terms of content, in terms of product, in terms of customer experience, like we discussed early this morning. And then, of course, when we look at the priorities that we have to think about when it comes to the future, then we talk about being able to measure everything, work with different kinds of partners, collaborate to build a better experience for our customers, and of course, better product responding to customer experience. Very much relevant to Martin Lindstrom's talk this morning as well. So thank you everyone for having us. Thank you, Francesco,
folks.
Thank you.
Evgeny, and Chris.